Një ditë të gjithëve. Ky është një forum I vjeshtës dhe I pasditës. Kemi ndru edhe orën prej forumeve paraprake, por ky është forumi I tretë që ne po organizojmë bashkë me një pjesë të ambasadorëve të akredituar në Kosovë. Është kënaqësi për ne që sot kemi ambasadorin Cliff, si folësin e tretë të kësaj vjeshte, pra, me të cilin ne do të ndajmë disa çështje fillimisht dhe pastaj do të kemi edhe pjesën e diskutimit për anës juaj. Ne sigurisht që ka qenë I pamundur që ne ta anashkalojmë çështjen e krijimit të institucioneve si çështje e parë. Pra ne do të flasim për krijimin e institucioneve të reja të Kosovës që përfundoi thuajse dje dhe ende jemi në mësumje të vëzhgë dhe të sëret për kryeministrin e ri, për qeverinë e ri, për ministrat e ri dhe të vjetër, sigurisht. Pastaj do të flasim për gjykatën speciale, e cila sipas gjitha gjasa do të jetë një prej problemeve kryesore që qeveria e ri do të merret prej fillimit të saj, ndoshta shumë më shumë prej vitit që po vjen, pra prej vitit 2015, pozicionin ose vlerësimet e ambasadorit Cliff në raport me këtë. Sigurisht dhe një ndër çështjet që ne kemi adresuar, sikur e kemi parë në ftesën që kemi dërguar, do të jetë edhe pak a shumë relacioni I Kosovës në antarësinë në organizata ndërkombëtare. Në lidhje me këtë, ne kemi ftuar ambasadorin për të folur edhe për një për organizata ku Foli ka qenë iniciator, ku bashkë me qeverinë britanike dhe ambasadorin këtu, ne kemi bërë një punë e cila ka të bëjë me antarësimin e Kosovës në partneritetin për qeverisë të hapur, dhe sigurisht që do të kemi edhe një përshkrim pak a shumë të vogël për këtë, por pa anashkaluar dhe procesin e MSA-s, siç e dini, një pjesë e deklarimeve të fundit ka qenë se si do të jetë ky proces I MSA-s, se si do të miratohet, në cilin organ të Bashkimit Evropian do të miratohet, si do të shkojë ratifikimi, a do të shkojë në shtete veçëveç, në ato shtete që na kanë njohur ose jo, dhe sigurisht që ne do të presim nga ambasadori Cliff që të na jep ndoshta edhe 2-3 çështje që sipas ambasadorit do duhet që qeveria e re e ardhshme, qeveria aktuale pra, qeveria e re, të merret në një afat të cazan 100 ditor, por jo vetëm 100 ditor, po ndoshta një afat të paktën edhe 4 vjeçar. Siç e dini pra, është një përshkrim 15 minutash për temat që kemi marrë nga që kemi dërguar edhe ambasadorit edhe tek ju. Do të jetë një përshkrim për secilën pra në total 15 minuta, dhe pastaj do të hapim diskutimin dhe debatin me ju të pranishëm. Edhe njëherë ju falenderit që sot jeni bashkë me ne dhe falenderojmë edhe ambasadorin për prezencën e tij sot në këtë forum. Ambasador, fjala është juaj.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you very much for having me today. Is it okay if I speak in English? Because I'm afraid my Albanian isn't very good, and we know some ambassadors have said things in Albanian in this forum, but I'm afraid my language skills are not up to that. Patrick has just reminded me actually that fairly soon after my arrival in 2011, I spoke in this forum. That was fairly soon after the formation of what is generally described as the Batchy II government. Here I am today speaking just after the formation of the Mustafa I government, I suppose it is. So I'm very happy to share my thoughts with you on these, how many are there? 4 topics. You've got 4 topics for me, but of course I'm very open to talk about other things if people would like to raise them during the question and answer. So, first of all, and I suspect this topic was devised before we knew that the new government would have been formed by today, is about the formation of the institutions following the 8th of June general election, and particularly the role of what's described as external assistance in this process. Well, First of all, I think it is very good news that a new government has been formed. Of course, it took 6 months from the, it was actually 6 months to the day after the general election that the Parliament was finally constituted with the election of Mr. Kadri Veseli as the Speaker, and another day till the actual formation of the government. That's rather a long time to go between an election and the formation of a government, particularly when you are in a process of SAA negotiations with the EU, when you're in the process of dialogue with Serbia, when you're trying to deal with huge economic problems, unemployment, young people leaving the country and so on. So although it's taken a very long time, I think it's good, and now the new government really needs to get moving, and I'm very pleased that already the Minister of European Integration met the EU ambassadors this morning, set out very clearly what he sees as the priorities, particularly with regard to things like the Stabilisation and Association Agreement and the visa liberalisation roadmap, and some of the issues which we'll come on to, which are related to that process of EU integration. Now, famously, during the formation of these institutions, the international community, the Americans, the EU, did not produce any brown envelopes or envelopes of any colour, and we said, look, this is a process which has to be domestically owned, it has to be a homegrown parliament and a homegrown government. You've got to do these things yourselves. I think that was an important message because we know Kosovo is famously sui generis. It has its own difficulties, many of which stem from non-recognition by a number of countries, including 5 in the EU. But really, if Kosovo is going to be part of the process of Euro-Atlantic integration, then it has got to be able to form its own institutions without outside nannying, if you like, help from your friends outside. During the process, the Quint countries all made it very clear, I think, that the institutions had to be respected, above all the Constitutional Court, the presidency, the rules had to be followed, but then you had to let the process roll out. I think it's fair to say that during this process, I think the President very wisely asked the Constitutional Court for guidance on a number of points, because it's all very well for us to talk. We've got 750 years of experience of Parliament in Britain. You've got 6 years of independence. You've got no precedents as we have. So I think it was very wise to ask the Constitutional Court for guidance, particularly because with the announcement of the so-called VLAN bloc, I think Kosovo moved into new territory. I almost think that some of the people who helped draw up the constitution hadn't actually thought of the possibility that, as in many European countries, you might have a government that would be formed by the smaller parties clubbing together. So anyway, I think the Constitutional Court did its job. The President did her job. I think some of us were a bit confused by some of the rulings by the Constitutional Court. I don't think any of us knew to start with what this thing about on the one hand, the Speaker has to come from the largest single party, but on the other hand, it's the duty of the MPs to come together to elect the Speaker, and there's no excuse for going to another general election. It took us a few weeks to work out what that meant. But in the end, we all concluded it meant that the PDK had the right to nominate the Speaker, and of course that had certain consequences we've all seen for the Blank Coalition and the ultimate decision of the LDK to go into coalition with the PDK. But that's all a domestic process. It's your business. It's your democratic structures. And so I think we're pleased that we've now seen the formation of this government, which is not something that has been engineered from outside. Yeah. So anyway, so now we've got the institutions. I think, you know, we have already said that we congratulate the new government on its formation. We're looking forward to working with the new government. Obviously, there are some ministers in the new government we know very well. There are some others we don't know so well. But I think you know, our job as a country that supports Kosovo's territorial integrity and sovereignty, that supports the Euro-Atlantic integration process, that supports dialogue with Serbia, you know, we will be doing everything we can to work with this government to make a success of its work. Now, one of the big challenges for the new government, and it says here in this piece of paper I've been given, the special court as the new government's most challenging challenge. Well, at the risk of confusing anyone, I would challenge whether that actually is the biggest issue for the new government. I mean, only in the sense I'm not diminishing the importance of the special court, but I think in a way the gates have been opened by the previous parliament. The decision of the previous parliament to support the establishment of a special court that would be a Kosovo court, but with a, if you like, a big leg outside Kosovo and a rather smaller leg inside Kosovo. That has already opened the gates. I think the PDK, the LDK, the Srpska Lista, the G6, the people in this coalition, all quite clear that the special court needs to be established. Of course, there are some challenges. You've got to get a double two-thirds majority for a constitutional amendment that will allow a Kosovo court to sit outside Kosovo. There are some challenges getting the arrangements for the special court through the Dutch parliament. But I think everyone is clear, at least I hope they are, that this court has to go forward, that the Special Investigative Task Force has done a report. It says that certain people will be prosecuted. We don't know who those people are, but when those people are summoned to the court, they will have to go. So, I mean, you know, it's a challenge, but I think there are some much bigger challenges before the new government. And I would say that there are sort of three related things. One is what you might call the economic challenge, which is both a challenge about employment. We know everyone argues about what the figures are, but there's sort of 40% or possibly more unemployment. There's higher unemployment among young people than there is among older people. There is a need for good economic governance. So that economic package, I think, is a huge challenge for the new government. I think linked to that, there is a public administration challenge where I think it's very important the new government gets it right now, because once you make the wrong decisions on public administration, it's very difficult to put them right afterwards. And of course, all of that links with the rule of law. You're not going to solve the economic challenges unless you have courts which are respected by investors, courts who understand how modern business works, and who can make judgments that are going to be respected. So I think all of that is a huge challenge. And if I'm honest, not many people like to talk about this in Kosovo, but as we saw in Britain in the 1980s, you know, if you're going to make the transition from what is really a, if you like, a state public sector-led economy to a private sector-led economy, the reality is a whole lot of people are going to have to be made redundant before the private sector bit of the economy can begin to suck up that unemployment. And that process of transition is very, very difficult. We went through it. All those countries in Central Europe, which had been part of the former Warsaw Pact system, you know, they had to make this transition. And I think that transition is really still before Kosovo. So, yes, the new government has promised to create jobs. The Prime Minister, Mustafa, has talked about the importance of the private sector. But managing that matrix when you're already working with a base of 40% unemployment is going to be very challenging. And then with the question of the public administration, one of the things that's absolutely crucial is that when the new parliament meets, it has got to appoint people who are really professional to these institutions, like the privatization agency, the Independent Commission on Mining and Minerals, the boards of the state-owned industries. This cannot anymore be where you stick useless people who are on the payroll of one political party or another. You know, we've seen 2 failed privatizations of PTK under the previous government. You know, this country can't afford that sort of thing again. But, you know, when you look at the huge staffing in PTK, who actually get pretty good salaries by Kosovo standards, that is unsustainable, and that is going to have to change. So I think there's some quite hard decisions that are going to have to be taken within this framework of creating more jobs and better economic governance. But what I will say is that the EU countries will stand behind Kosovo if this new government really starts to try and make these changes. We know it's very, very difficult. And actually, if we look at the dialogue with Serbia, you kind of have a microcosm of this problem up in the north, where you know, so many people are employed in the municipal structures, including doing things like collecting the garbage, which is now privatized and outsourced south of the EBAR, that's part of the problem of getting rid of the Serb Belgrade funded structures. So it's all linked with this process of economic change. Sorry, that's not really very much about the special court, is it? But there you are. Kosovo's membership in international organisations and the role the UK plays in this regard. For example, the EU and OGP. Well, the good news is that Britain is still part of the EU, despite what you may occasionally read in the newspapers, and we see ourselves as one of the, if not the strongest supporter of Kosovo's EU path. We think that it is essential that we get the Stabilisation and Association Agreement signed. It's all been negotiated, it's all been initialed, and of course there is a particular challenge, we all know, because we continue to have 5 EU countries that don't recognise Kosovo. But I think there is a mechanism to secure signature of the SAA in early 2015, but of course then the challenge still comes, because the next step after a suitable time, once you've implemented the SAA, we presume Kosovo will apply for membership of the EU, and you can't fudge the issue then of the member states. The process of joining the EU has to involve all 28 existing member states. So, you know, we're hoping that by the time we get to that point, some of those 5 non-recognisers may have changed their minds, and we are working very hard with the Foreign Ministry, with the British Council, on programmes to change opinion in those 5 EU non-recognising states. And I think we have seen some movement in Romania, in Slovakia, in Greece, and I think even in Cyprus. And of course we have a Prime Minister of Romania now who has said that you know, it is the aim of his government to recognise Kosovo. We no longer have a President of Romania who is opposed to that, so we may well see some movement on this. But we will be working very hard on that issue. and we will continue, of course, to work also outside the EU with some of our Commonwealth partners and so on who haven't recognised Kosovo yet to secure more recognitions worldwide. But we recognise that so long as Russia doesn't recognise, there is a block to Kosovo's aspiration to join the UN. But there are lots of other organisations which we can work on. We've worked with Fol on getting Kosovo into the Open Government Partnership. That's not been very easy because it's been run by Indonesia, which is a non-recogniser up to now, and now we've got Mexico, which is a non-recogniser. But I think it's really good that the action plan that goes with open government has already been adopted here, and we will continue to work on that. Very important, Council of Europe. We need to take advantage of the Belgian chairmanship to move forward Kosovo's application for the Council of Europe. I spoke to the outgoing foreign minister not long ago about the fact that we didn't think it was sensible for Kosovo to actually put in its application while you had a government that was in technical mandate, because some of the quasi-recognisers and non-recognisers would use this as an excuse to slow down Kosovo's process. But now we have a new government. We're on day one. We've got a new foreign minister. We've got a deputy foreign minister. We should be getting on with that application now for Council of Europe membership. We continue to think it's important that Kosovo makes use of its membership of other international organisations it's already joined. When we come to look, as we will have to, at the challenge of constitutional and electoral reform, because we still need to do an electoral reform, then using the Venice Commission, really, really important. I think, going back to what I was saying about the economy, you've now not only World Bank membership, you've got EBRD EU membership, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Really, that membership hasn't been used very much yet. There's some interesting, there is a project which is more or less ready, the rehabilitation of the railway from Hani Elizet to Pushre Kosovo, Kosovo Polje. But there's a wastewater project for Gillian, which kind of is stuck somewhere. These EBRD projects really need to go ahead now, and of course it's a way of doing infrastructure development without burdening the budget too much, which is one of the things the Prime Minister says he wants to do. Is there anything I forgot? Oh, yeah. Congratulations to Kosovo on joining the Olympic movement. You have no idea what a nightmare it was during the London Olympics, dealing with the International Olympic Committee. I'll probably be sacked for saying this, but I have never come across such a politicised organisation in my life. And it was very, very difficult during the London Olympics, even with the idea that Mylinda Kelmendi would come under the IOC flag. In the end, as you all know, she had to compete under the Albanian flag because it just so happened she also had Albanian citizenship, and Albania was already in the IOC, so that was the easy way out. But it's really good that Kosovo has, first of all, got a few weeks ago provisional membership, and now full membership of the IOC, that your athletes will be at Rio, as full Kosovo athletes with a Kosovo flag there. Actually, there was a Kosovo flag in London, but it wasn't supposed to be there. And the thing was, I don't think any of the people from the IOC knew what the Kosovo flag was, so they didn't stop it getting into the stadium. But this is really good news, and I think, when you think of just energising young people, boring old politicians, but athletes, really do press some important buttons with young people. So I think that's very good news on the international front. Yeah, that's it. Okay, question number 4. What are the 3 priorities, according to you, that the new government should have? Oh, I think I've answered that one already. So economic development, rule of law, and public administration. Sorry, I've really covered all that, I think. So I'll leave that for you, I think, to do some questions. But clearly, all those areas are really, really crucial. Thank you.
Falenderojm ambasadorin. Besoj që do të kemi interes për pyetje. Ju lutem, koment ose pyetje.
Përshëndetje, Besnik Tahiri, Klan Kosova. Mr. Ambassador, I want to ask you first, do you think that is it fair that Srpska Lista has asked for so many conditions to be part of the new government here in Kosovo? And do you think also it's fair enough from Mr. Jablanovic, who has said, I'm going to be part of the Kosovo government, but I do not recognize Kosovo as an independent state. And you said already that the international community has not intervened into creating the new government. Are you sure about that? And can you tell us, has the international community was the international community against that vendosje to be part of the new government? Thank you.
Well, can I take the first one, the last point first? Sorry, because I think that's fairly straightforward to answer. I think probably there were differences of emphasis in different bits of the international community about Veta Vendosje participation in the government. I think we were quite clear as Britain. We said we have no objection to Veta Vendosje being part of the government. This is, it does some weird things, but it's a legitimate political party. If the coalition wants to include Veta Vendosje, then that's fine with us. But the important thing is that the dialogue should continue. And the complication with Veta Vendosje was that they had always stood out against the dialogue, or this kind of dialogue, in a really strident way. And then they were saying that they wanted to lead the dialogue with Serbia. So we found that a bit of a contradiction. So the point, I think in the end, all of the international community simply stressed that the dialogue had to continue, and we had some doubts about that dialogue being led by Veta Vendosje. But I admit that some of my colleagues were rather more stridently dubious about Veta Vendosje than we were. On the question of Srpska Lista, this comes from the sui generis circumstances in which we operate in Kosovo. I think the good news is, as you heard me say before, we had participation in the local elections and then in the national elections by the Serbs in the north for the very first time. We now have the support of Belgrade for the participation of Kosovo Serbs in the parliament and government, which we didn't really have before. The SLS and Zajednička budućnost, when they existed, didn't really have backing from Belgrade into what they're doing. Now the Srpska Lista, which is a broad political party, a broad church, does have that support, and I think that's very important. Yes, I know there are people who stick stickers over words Republic of Kosovo and say they sort of don't recognise it. But, I mean, the very fact that these guys are coming into the parliament, they're coming into the Kosovo government, de facto, they're recognising Kosovo. They may have to sort of say, we're not recognising Kosovo by doing this, but de facto they're working within the Kosovo institutions, and I think that's really good news. And as far as the conditions that were set by Srpska Lista, they all relate to the dialogue anyway. The Association of Serb Majority Municipalities, the Zajednica Srpskih Općina, is a rather strange thing in the sense that in the political dialogue, really Belgrade made the whole political dialogue revolve around this question of establishing the Zajednica Srpskih Općina. And then once the political agreement had been made on the 19th of April, once we moved into the elections and so on, sort of people stopped talking about it, or only talked about it in very, very general terms. I mean, you talk to guys like Ljubo Maric, who's now the Minister of Local Government. I mean, as the leader of the management team, he was just messed around endlessly. It was very difficult for the management team to draw up this statute for the Zajednica Srpskih Općina. So I think to sort of say we've got to move ahead with this association now is perfectly reasonable, and I think it's absolutely right. because I don't think we're going to solve the problem of the so-called parallel residual institutions in the north without forming this association. And of course it will be very controversial, and there'll be one view here and another view in Belgrade and one view in the north of Kosovo and another view in Gračanica. But we now need to move ahead on that. And that's the sort of thing that we in the international community can support. Other things, well, number of ministers and all that stuff, that's sort of normal political horse trading. I think actually they've got fewer ministries than SLS had at the beginning of the last government. They had 3 ministries, now they've only got 2 ministries. But they want more deputy ministers. Well, that's fine, because in areas like agriculture or economic development, of course, it makes sense to look after the interests of the minority communities. So having a deputy minister there, I think, is fine. And as you all know, working on the railway up to the north, that's one of my priorities, and we really need to move ahead on that as a new subject in the dialogue.
Ne imagjoni Radio Dugagjini. Zoti Cliff, okay.
Sorry, do I need to do this in?
Ne imagjoni Radio Dugagjini. A besoni se do të ketë luftë kundër korrupsionit dhe të krimit organizuar nga qeveria Mustafa, kur dihet se tashmë për të ekzistojnë 70 lëndë në prokurori gjatë kohës së ka qenë kryetari i Prishtinës?
Well, this is one of the key issues for the new government. I think it's quite interesting. It was actually formed on International Anti-Corruption Day. I mean, I think this government knows that if it doesn't begin to address these issues of corruption, it's not going to move forward on the EU path. And when I talk about putting professional people into all these agencies and regulatory structures, okay, we've got the head of SHIC as the Speaker of Parliament, but I think he's got to understand that all these dubious structures and the LDK sort of, real estate mafia from Pristina, all this sort of nonsense got to stop. There has got to be a much more professional approach in the ministries, in the agencies, in the regulatory structures. Yes, there's got to be a real fight against corruption. It's going to be very difficult in some areas. Look at the Ministry of Health. Every time I met the head of the Kosovo Medical Agency, we had some great agreement. We were going to cooperate. We did actually get to the point where the Kosovo Medical Agency accepted British recognition of certain medicines. But then as soon as we got this agreement, the guy would get arrested. And then his successor would be arrested. And then his successor's successor would be arrested. I mean, that sort of thing really needs to be tackled by the new government. I think if they don't fight corruption, they will fail. And I think they know at this point that if they don't fight corruption, they will fail. We know it's very difficult. It means changing social attitudes to bribes, for a start. And of course, it's not a problem that's unique to Kosovo either. But it really is important to start tackling this issue. And I think the first step is to have some clean people in these, not only in the government, but these other institutions which are technically appointed by Parliament, and where the new Parliament should have real oversight.
Faleminderit, unë jam Artur Mulliqi nga Radio Televizioni I Kosovës, pyetjen do ta parashtroj në gjuhën shqipe. Në pjesën e prezantimit tuaj, zotri Cliff, në pjesën e parë, derisa nuk ishte pyetje, kur folët për krijimin e institucioneve, thatë që nuk ka pasur ndërhyrje ndërkombëtare në krijimin e këtyre institucioneve. Pikërisht në vendin ku po flisni ju, para se të krijoheshin këto institucione, ambasadori amerikane Jacobson ka dhënë një deklaratë shumë të fuqishme, dhe një ditë pas kësaj deklarate kemi parë edhe lëvizjet e para, të cilat kanë ardhur në drejtim të krijimit të institucioneve të Kosovës. Po ashtu edhe ju keni qenë angazhuar në takime me kryetarin e AK-s po atë ditë, dhe keni pasur takime edhe me drejtues të tjerë të partive politike për të përshpejtuar krijimin e institucioneve të Kosovës. Dëshiroj të pyes edhe një herë, sikurse edhe kolegu më herët që pyetja, jeni sigurt se nuk ka pasur ndërhyrje ndërkombëtare dhe a mendoni se do të ishte bërë ky koalicion qeverisës nëse nuk do të kishte ndërhyrje ndërkombëtare? Dhe një pyetje tjetër, folet për reformimin e administratës publike. A presni që të ketë reformim të administratës publike nëse kemi parasysh që qeveria që në start e ka ngarkuar administratën publike me numër më të madh ministrive? Më herët kemi pasur më pak, tash kemi 21 ministri.
Well, first of all, I think we should be quite clear that if you mean by interference, if you think that us encouraging the Kosovo institutions to set up a government when there hadn't been one for 5 months is interference, okay, that's a kind of interference, if you like. But it was really important for us. Here we are as a member of the EU fighting your corner on many, many issues in Brussels, and then everyone turns around and said, this isn't a real country, it can't even form a government. So I think it was entirely understandable that we all encouraged the establishment of the institutions, but we very definitely did not encourage one particular format or another. And if you say I had meetings with Mr. Haradinaj, which I did, I have meetings with all the party leaders actually. Well, Mr. Haradinaj is not in the government, as you may have noticed. Of course we have meetings with all the political leaders. If the Kosovo ambassador in London has a meeting with the foreign secretary, we don't say that Kosovo's trying to form the new coalition in Britain, or whatever new government we have after our elections in May. No, I think that, would this government have been formed? I don't know, but we were getting to the stage we needed to form some sort of government. I mean, if you think about it, if this hiatus had gone on for another 2 months, the government would actually have run out of money because there was no budget. I think it was right for your friends to encourage you to form a government, but we did not. None of us said, it should be a PDK, LDK, Srpska Lista, G6 coalition. Nobody ever said that or worked, to that particular end. We just said, you need to do this. Sorry, was that? Oh, public, yeah. Well, numbers of ministries. You do have an awful lot of ministries for a very small country. And if we're really going to have, 3 deputy ministers in most ministries, one from PDK, one from LDK, one from the minorities, it does seem a bit excessive to me. And remember, that's all money coming out of the Kosovo budget that could otherwise go into health and education. But I think, the real issue about public administration reform is actually twofold. And, we spent quite a lot of our own money, when DFID's last major project here was on public administration reform. And I'm afraid what they recommended has not happened at all. What we need to do is to move towards structures where you have genuinely empowered civil servants. When I go in the last government, when I used to go to ministries, not in every case, but let's say in 9 cases out of 10, if the minister was accompanied by anyone, it was a political advisor, not the relevant head of department who was a normal Kosovo civil servant on a Kosovo salary. And I think that that's one of the things that really needs to be tackled by this new government. I mean, if you're going to start negotiating for membership of the EU, you're not going to be able to do it in each field with a minister and 2 political advisors. You're going to have in-depth experts who are from the civil service and who won't change when the minister changes. I think we're beginning to see in the Ministry of European Integration a cadre of proper, capable civil servants who are properly empowered. And indeed, when the minister came to see the EU ambassadors this morning, he made the point he wasn't going to go around changing people because of their political colour, and I think we need to look at that in other ministries. The other point, it's very bizarre that under the Minister of Public Administration in the last government, who's also the Minister of Public Administration in the new government, you have a minister from the minority communities, but we're making very little progress on this question of 10% representation of the minorities in the government, particularly in the central government institutions. So I think that's got to be another target of this government, and of course with that goes the question of recognising the diplomas from the University of Mitrovica North, because the reason, certainly at the top level, you don't get people from the minorities, particularly from the Serb community, working in the administration is they're told, sorry, you don't have a valid university diploma, because although we've got this agreement on mutual recognition of diplomas between Kosovo and Serbia, guess what? It doesn't cover the main university where the Serbs go in Kosovo itself. So I think that's all got to be tackled on public administration reform. Maybe in the future, the government will look at the question of reducing the number of ministries. There are ways of doing it, but perhaps it's just a bit difficult when you're setting up a new coalition government. Even we occasionally have had rather a lot of ministries for a country the size of Britain. But yeah, it is an issue.
Tatjana Slavić, RTK2. Ukoliko mogu da primetim, nema prevoda na srpskom jeziku danas. Učešće Srba u vladi Kosova. Da li će u ovom mandatu imati veći uticaj od prethodnog ili će imati manji uticaj? I nakon formiranja vlade, s obzirom da je formirana nakon 6 meseci, šta vi mislite koji će biti glavni prioriteti vlade? Dakle, koji su glavni prioriteti?
Da li govorim na srpskom jeziku? Ako hoćete? To je lakše za mene nego albanski jezik, nažalost. Ja mislim da glavni prioritet će biti ekonomija. Apsolutno potrebno je pitanje nezaposlenosti, da ljudi imaju mogućnost za radnih mjesta koji će trajati. I to je problem da do sad ovdje na Kosovo ideja je vrlo često da radne mjesta dolaze iz vlade, da vlada će dati radne mjesta. I na kraju krajeva u ekonomiji Europe više radne mjesta dolaze iz privatnog sektora. Zato ja mislim da to dugoročno to je glavni prioritet, ali naravno to je vezano sa pitanjem vladavine prava i dobra administracija.
A koliko je bitno učešće Srba u ovoj novoj vladi? Da li će oni imati veće prioritete od prethodnog mandata ili će biti na istom? To mi niste odgovorili.
Vidjet ćemo, ja ne znam. Imamo drugi ljudi. Ja znam ove ljudi. Branimir Stojanović, koji je bio do sad gradonačelnik Gračanice. Ja mislim on ima dobru sliku za situaciju srpske zajednice, naročito južno od Ibra. Jablanović, naravno, on zna tačno kako je situacija u Leposaviću i Sverno od Ibra. Naravno, mi kao ambasada uvijek mi smo imali programi sa Ministarstvom zajednice i povratak. Zato vidjet ćemo. Ali ja mislim da uloga Srba i uloga drugih nevećinske zajednice će biti ključno za Kosovo. Kosovo je multietničko društvo. To je apsolutno jasno iz plana Ahtisarija.
Sibel Arimi, divizja Fol. Me që jemi te konsultimi i institucioneve qeverisë, në Kosovë ekzistojnë fakt 50% e popullatës që i takojnë grave. Dhe në fakt në këto institucione vetëm 2 ministri ju kanë dhënë grave që të udhëheqin. A mendoni që kur flitet për çështjen e pjesëmarrjes së grave në proceset vendimarrëse duhet patjetër të ekzistojë një zarf apo duhet të krijohen patjetër rrethana të jashtëzakonshme?
Well, I must say there was a certain irony in the Prime Minister saying that one of his key priorities was the role of women, and then there were only 2 women in this government. But don't forget, there were only, actually at the end of the last government, there were only 2 women. Once Mimosa Leela had gone off to be mayor of Jakova, there were only 2 women in the previous government. I used to say, actually, when I first came here, it was rather a long time before I realized that, in its heyday, the previous government only had 3 women ministers, because they were, it was Adita Tahiri, it was Mimosa Leela, and it was Laura Chitaku, and I was seeing them so regularly, it didn't sort of occur to me for a while that there weren't any other women ministers in the government. It's a bit of a problem, because, our government isn't sort of famous for having very many women in it. There's a lot of criticism of the present British coalition that despite promoting women's rights, there aren't very many women ministers in it. It is an important issue, and maybe, given what the Prime Minister has said, when we come to the appointment of some of these rather numerous deputy ministers, then we will see some more women appointed. And again, when we look at all these institutions like the Privatisation Agency, the Independent Commission on Minings and Minerals, sorry, I keep on focusing on them, but all the, the Kosovo Judicial Council and so on, we ought to see more women in those institutions as well. But if you ask me personally, I'm not in favour of artificial methods of pushing women into government processes. It's obviously important to encourage it, but to, just as I don't think we should have, incompetent people appointed because they're, members of a particular political party, I don't think we should have incompetent people, appointed just because it ticks a certain gender box. What we need to do is see a holistic approach to promoting the rights of women in the government. But I agree with you. I think it was one of the things we were all slightly disappointed with as we saw the list of ministers, that there are only 2 women in the government, and of course there are some very able people who might have been appointed to the government who weren't, but I really don't know why that happened exactly.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to make the question. I'm Bojana Shaoli, part of the civil society. So, as we know, with the last agreement that is made and with the new government, we know that Thaçi is going to be one of the potential candidates to be a president after Atifete Yaga is going to finish her mandate as a president, right? So do you think that he's going to be in the best position for being the next president, bearing in mind what he has done during his mandate as a Prime Minister of Kosovo? What do you think about this proposition that they have made for the next president of Kosovo?
Well, I think it's another of those things we're not going to interfere in. I mean, this is a domestic political process. The president is elected by Parliament. If, when we come to that point, in whenever it is, March, April 2016, the majority of MPs are for Hashim Thaçi, then that's fine by us. Obviously there is always a question in democracies where you have figures who've been very influential in politics, and once they've done Prime Minister for a certain number of years, what do you do them after that? We don't have a president, we have a queen, so we don't have that particular slot available. But it's a process we've seen in many European countries where the person who's been Prime Minister for a long time has moved up to the presidency. We've just seen it happening in Turkey. Obviously he's a very experienced figure. He's a masterful political operator, and so if he goes to the presidency, we'll see.
Nëse s'ka pyetje tjera, unë po shtroj edhe një pyetje për ambasadorin. I will try to have another questions. Ideja është që ne jemi në një proces dialogut me Serbinë dhe po është kërkuar që nga viti 2011. Edhe është kërkuar që Kosova të ketë gjenerozitet në marrëveshje, mirë po nuk është parë që ky gjenerozitet është kthyer nga Bashkimi Evropian ose edhe nga vetë Serbia. A mendoni zoti ambasador që Kosova dhe Serbia do të përfundojnë dialogun duke njohur njëra tjetrën dhe kur mund ndodh ky proces? Dhe nëse s'ndodh kjo, a mendoni që ne mund të jemi pjesë e Bashkimit Evropian duke mos njohur njëra tjetrën?
As they say, that's the $64,000 question. As you won't be surprised, I'm not going to answer it, or not answer it very clearly. Maybe I should try in Albanian, yeah. I think the point is that the Kosovo issue actually doesn't loom very large in Serbian politics. When you go to Belgrade, people don't talk to you about Kosovo. Even when I say I'm the British ambassador in Kosovo, people say, oh, that must be very difficult. But they don't really talk about Kosovo. But if politicians, as President Nikolic has just done, raise the question of recognizing Kosovo, then suddenly it becomes an issue and everyone starts talking about it. I mean, you know that we have coined this phrase normalization. We are looking for Serbia to normalize its relations with Kosovo. That's having a normal, good neighborly relationship, not interfering in the north or in these structures, getting rid of these parallel structures, working with Kosovo, and that's what we will continue to press. That will be there's all this debate at the moment, which I won't go into, about opening chapters with Serbia, chapter 35, which is specifically about Kosovo, or chapter 32. But I think you can rest assured that having a good working relationship with Kosovo will be a key requirement imposed upon Serbia as it goes down its EU path. I think I can also assure you that countries like mine will not allow Serbia to block Kosovo's EU path. Just as, by the way, if you overtake Serbia, as happened with the regatta process with some of the earlier, maybe at one point Kosovo will be going faster than Serbia, and we won't allow you to block Serbia either. But seriously, I think, we're going down a path where I and most of my colleagues can't quite define what the end point would be. I would agree with you, it would be very unusual, it would be very sui generis to have two countries inside the EU, one of which doesn't recognize the other. But people talk about the situation in the two Germanys, which is not totally relevant because, of course, the two Germanys weren't both in the EU, but they were both in the UN without full recognition of one another. So I think we have to be inventive, and I'm not going to predict exactly where we're going to be. But what I can say is that I think my country and a number of others will make absolutely sure that Serbia's progress does not act as a block on Kosovo's progress. So I think what Kosovo should be doing is concentrating on its own EU path and making all these economic and rule of law reforms that we've been talking about, and kind of leave. That's one thing you can rely on the international community for, or certain bits of it, is to work on your EU aspirations and your other aspirations, Council of Europe, ultimately OSCE and UN. But I'm not going to say any more than that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Faleminderit gjithëve, shihemi në forumet e ardhshme.